Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. India's wildcats, meet all 15 species, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Surya Ramachandran. It is a pleasure to have you here today, Surya. I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you so much, Kendall. Hello, everyone. Before I start off with this exciting saga of Indian wildlife, I'd just like to warn you all that I have a storm coming my way from the Arabian Sea. I live in South India, in a place called the Nilgiris. And we have a storm warning and the rain is slowly increasing. So if there is any network difficulties, I will try to get back in. But hopefully we will be able to get past the hour without any issues. But just to be on the safe side, I'm going to turn off my video to make sure the bandwidth isn't affected by that. Okie dokie. Okay, so here we go. India's
Hey,
wildcats. Yes.
Sorry, I think you stopped sharing your screen and your webcam's still up. I think you did the opposite of what you wanted.
Oh, sorry about that, Kendall.
That's okay.
Is it okay now?
There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. It is 12:30 in the night for me here, so sorry if I pressed the wrong button, everyone. So yes, so here we are. India's wildcats, meet all 15 species. This is a very interesting and a topic which I'm always proud to present, simply because India is one of the few countries in the world which can proudly say we have 15 species of wildcats, whereas Africa as a continent has 10 species of wildcats. It sounds 15 sounds like a lot, but we will try to cover them slowly. But I'm going to emphasize more on the small cats here rather than the big cats, because a lot of people know everything that they need to know about the big cats, but the small cats usually get lost in the translation. Okay. Okay, that's me. For those who missed me in the video, I'm a NatHab expedition leader. So yes, so we have about 42 to 44. There's a lot of nomenclature and taxonomical updates happening recently. A species of wildcats on the planet across all the continents except Australia. And we are going to first learn to differentiate between the big cats and the small cats. I mean, what do we really mean when we say a big cat? Does a big cat necessarily mean a cat which is big, or is there more to it? So one of the key features to note is that the big cats are the ones that can roar. They have a modification in their larynx, a particular bone called the hyoid bone, which helps them roar. And apart from that, their whole dentition and their throat structure is very different from that of a small cat. Otherwise, as is there in the name, they're all cats. And here's a very interesting track from Ranthambore of a tiger. You can see the big pad of the tiger and the small pad of a jungle cat, which is walked over the track of the tiger much later. So you can see the size difference between a big cat and a small cat in this case. But if you look at the same thing with a clouded leopard, well, the clouded leopard's track would be probably double the size of a jungle cat, but the difference won't be all that much. So it's definitely one thing we can say, size is not necessarily the key to differentiate between a big cat and a small cat. We were just talking about the main difference, the modification of the larynx and the ability to roar. So that is what sets a big cat apart from a small cat. So before we start talking about each of the small cats separately, I'd like to bring about all the 15 in one frame. So this is a lovely piece of artwork which I usually use. It's by a friend of mine, Rohan. He runs a beautiful caricature firm called the Green Humor. So what we have in this page is that the top 5, the Bengal tiger, Asiatic lion, leopard, snow leopard, and the clouded leopard, are the 5 big cats of India. And the bottom 10 are the 10 small cats. So we will be looking at the 10 small cats in more detail because the big cats are something we are generally quite familiar with. So, why do we need to know about cats? Um the most important thing is they are charismatic species, they are keystone species, and they are apex predators in their own right. Even small cats, they are apex predators in their own right. But they also lead very different lives as compared to big cats. I mean, they lead very secretive lives. They occupy very important habitat niches. A big cat might be omnipresent across multiple habitats, whereas a small cat may be dependent on a small micro habitat for its life cycle. So they are very, very good indicators of changes in habitat. And the most important thing, they are very important but unfortunately invisible ecological controllers in their own right. So they form a very important they play a very important role in making sure the cycle and the balance is maintained. Like the picture very clearly elucidates a jungle cat with a rodent kill, but that's a very simple example. But they do much like that in many many different ways, despite the fact that they're not big and charismatic and they're not talked upon so much. And finally, the most important thing, we are going to talk about the issues they face, the conservation issues, and what we can do. So this is kind of how we will go about talking about each of these cats. uh, After this, we are going to start talking about each cat one after the other. And this is my favorite. The first one, the rusty spotted cat. There are two reasons why this is my favorite cat in India. One is, of course, written in text in the top. It's the smallest wild cat in the world. It is the size of a small kitten, if you can believe that. It's a very, very small cat. It feeds mainly on small lizards, geckos, grasshoppers, and things like that. But another important feature is very clearly seen on the map. This is the only cat species that is endemic to the Indian subcontinent. It might be hard to believe. Out of the 15 species of cats, 14 are found outside India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Pakistan. So the Indian subcontinent is a unit, and the rusty spotted cat is the only endemic cat to this region. So this is a very, very rare picture of a rusty spotted cat with tiny kittens. And why it is rare is simply because, unlike most other cats, the rusty spotted cat brings up its young in tree hollows. Can you believe that? This is a small cat which is arboreal, which spends the day in trees and even uses the hollows in trees to bring up the young ones as a means of protecting them from larger carnivores on the ground. And this is a very the picture to the left shows how the kittens spend the nights in the trees where the adult goes down looking for prey. So the rusty spotted cat is a very very uh, uh, it's a very important cat in many ways. But what I find key in this case is, if you look closely, you can see that every part of the face of the rusty spotted cat is lined with white, and they have these rust spots which form stripes on their sides. And another important feature is that they have a very cylindrical tail. So these, apart from the fact that they're very small, are very important features to identify a rusty spotted cat in the forest. And anywhere you go in India, anywhere you go on safari, you have a chance of coming across a rusty spotted cat, especially if you can walk around or drive around at night in the agricultural fields or in the forest areas around where you're staying. So that's a rusty spot cat. And just remember that I mentioned all the important features of the rusty spotted cat, because I will talk about why those features are important to note when in the field later in the talk. So the most widespread and the most omnipresent cat in India is the jungle cat. So as you can see in the map, it is found all across southern India, Persia, extending into the Arab countries into North Africa. So this is one of the cats which also included in the 10 species of cats that are found in the African subcontinent, African continent. So the jungle cat, again, a very, very tall cat, as you can see from the image, stripes on the insides of the feet, a short black tip tail, and tall ears. So this is a cat which is found in a multitude of habitats. So the picture to the left shows a jungle cat in the mangrove. So those of you who are not familiar with what a mangrove is a kind of forest which is found in coastal tidal creeks. So this is a wet, mucky, muddy, brackish water ecosystem, whereas the picture to the right shows a jungle cat hunting a rodent in the fields in the heart of the country. So they are found from the high forests of the Himalayas to rainforests to agricultural fields to even beaches and mangrove forests in our coast. So they are very, very widespread, and they play a different and a very distinct role in each of these ecosystems as both controllers, both of rodents, snakes, and even sometimes pest birds for farmers. So it's a very, very interesting mix of roles that a jungle cat plays. And you can see that their tall limbs help them hunt prey by jumping high up and darting at them from above. So especially rodents which they're trying to ambush, they go close and they do a tall jump, much like how the red foxes do. I've seen some of them do in Yellowstone when in my time in Yellowstone National Park. So it's a very similar behavior with the jungle cat. So the third interesting cat species, also interestingly, the second most widespread cat species in India is the leopard cat. So the leopard cat is found all across Southeast Asia and India, as you can see in the map. And as you can see from the photo to the left, it is very clear why it's called the leopard cat. So this cat has spots like a leopard or a cheetah, but it also has streaks or stripes on the shoulder and the forehead. And one very interesting feature to note here is that it is a very short cat with a very, very fat tail, which is a very clear indicator that it is an arboreal or a tree dwelling cat. So the fat tail helps it balance, and the short stature overall gives it a low center of gravity to move around amongst the twigs and the thinner branches of the tree. So the leopard cat is primarily a rainforest species. We associate this cat with rainforest, dense evergreen forests. Like for those of you who are traveling to Borneo, this is probably the cat that you will most likely see on any night around your properties in Danam Valley or Sabah or anywhere. But in India, it is found everywhere. But because it's found in rainforest, it's not very often seen in the field. But interestingly, recently what happened was they also found a population of leopard cats in the mangrove forests on the coasts. If you can believe that, this is a rainforest cat, a cat that requires dense evergreen forest to survive. And suddenly they found them in coastal tidal creeks along the, especially in places like Sundarbans, where this cat seemed to be quite common and abundant and feeding on things like rodents, fish, which have been washed by the up and down of the tide. So it's a very interesting and very highly adaptable cat. So that's one of the features to note about small cats is how interestingly they adapt to niche ecosystems. And talking about adaptations, this is the same leopard cat which is now, this photo is from almost 13,000 feet in the Himalayas. So now we are talking about dense rainforests, coastal mangrove ecosystems, and alpine steppe habitat where the same cat is found, exactly the same DNA, everything is the same except that it has adapted over one or two or three or four generations to a totally different way of life. And that is how beautiful the adaptability and the importance and the lifestyle of small cats is. So the leopard cat is one that kind of elucidates this behavior in a very, very interesting way. So now we are coming to the more niche ones, the ones that require a lot more seeking to find. One of which is the fishing cat. So the fishing cat, though it is included in the small cats, it's an anomaly because it's actually a very, very fat, stout, big cat. In fact, there's an old note in a British journal that I came across where a leopard cat actually killed a young leopard in a cage because they had put them in cages close to each other, and the leopard cat, the fishing cat managed to squeeze into the leopard's cage and kill it. So that is uh, how interesting the whole idea of small cats and big cats is. It's more about the anatomy, but not necessarily about size and power. So the fishing cat, a very, very stout cat, which is found mainly in aquatic ecosystems. So that is not something that you normally say about a cat. I mean, we always think as cat is tries to stay away from water, but a fishing cat is a cat that prefers the coastal swamps and some inland waterways and specializes in hunting fish. So this it does it in two ways, by hiding amongst the bushes in the banks and jumping into the water with one leap, catching the fish in its paws, grabbing it in its mouth with its long canines, and walking back into the bush. So that is how the fishing cat hunts. But one other very interesting adaptation of the fishing cat is that it has webbed digits. It has actually very mild webbing between the digits, very similar to what you would encounter in a platypus or an otter. But a fishing cat is it's probably the only cat species in the world which has webbing amongst the digits, and that helps it wade better in the shallows and also helps it not sink its feet into the wet mud of the coastal tidal creeks. And the one talking about adaptations, the fishing cat is now very commonly seen in areas of eastern India where they do coastal fish farming. So where there's absolutely no forest, no natural habitat, but the locals have started prawn and fish, shrimp farming and fish farming. So the fishing cats have moved into the area, and at night, as you can see in the picture to the right, they just wait at the edge of the ponds and catch fish and shrimp, and they just go back into sometimes even sewers and canals to hide for the day and come back out at night. So that is another very new age adaptation of a small cat, the fishing cats of the urban fisheries in the coastal eastern coast of India. And the same fishing cat, we are talking about coastal waterways, urban fisheries, and also some aquatic ecosystems. This is a fishing cat which is now in a grassland forest habitat in the Himalayan foothill forests. Again, we think we know them, we think we understand them, we think we know everything that we need to know about the story that they want us to see. But then they spring a surprise like this fishing cat in the Himalayan foothill forest. So this is a very interesting cat, the desert cat. So this cat is actually one of the most widespread cat species in the world, but we don't because it is actually a subspecies of the wildcat, which is found all across Europe and parts of Asia and even in the highlands of Scotland. But in India, the specific subspecies we get, it's called the desert cat. So the desert cat is a more sandy yellow color as compared to the European wildcat, but in every other way, it is quite similar to a European wildcat. So this one is found in very, very arid desert ecosystems. Some habitats like this, sometimes you even see them amongst the sand dunes of Rajasthan in Western India. So this is the range of the desert cat. So this range is a probable range where there are some few camera trap evidences, but this is where you can be sure that there are desert cats in plenty. And this is the range of the European wildcat. So this makes it quite clear that the subspecies we are talking about is pretty much restricted to Rajasthan and Gujarat, the western extremes of India, which is basically the Thar Desert. So here you can see desert cats using burrows to stay cool in the hot desert days amongst the sand dunes. And sometimes they even use low shrubs, and they come out at dusk, and sometimes they are nocturnal and they hunt rodents, scorpions, snakes, sometimes even hedgehogs, and even birds. And that's what they hunt to survive. And they go back into the desert scrub to avoid the hottest parts of the day. So, very typical behavior of a small cat, but interestingly, one of the few small cats that's adapted to a complete desert lifestyle, and they can even go for months without a drink of water. which is not something you can say often about wildcats in the world. But this one lives in absolute arid desert areas where there is no water for miles, and it seems to survive using a very limited moisture which is there in the leaves in the morning dew, and of course the moisture that they gain from the food they eat. And I wouldn't even be surprised, it hasn't been proven yet, but I believe they do eat some of the fleshy fruit that the desert scrubs provide seasonally to supplement their water requirements. And another interesting feature of the desert cat is that you can see three different photos here. These are three different uh, looking cats, but all of them are desert cats. So the interesting thing is they actually have very different color morphs, but the key things to note are the two dark stripes, one from the eye, one on the cheek, a very flat head, pointy ears, and the stripes on the feet and the spots on the body. And it also generally is a very square-faced cat as compared to the other cats we've come across till now. So a desert cat, that's how you note, and you cannot rely entirely on the color pattern. I think this one spent too much time in the hot sun, so it's fully bleached, whereas the other two have played it smart. So this is the forgotten cat of India, the caracal. I mean, for those of you who've been to Africa, you'll be quite familiar with the caracal. But interestingly, the caracal is a cat which is also found in western and parts of northern India. So this cat actually is there's a lovely book written by a small cat expert called The Forgotten Cats of India, and he wrote it exclusively on the caracal because we don't even know how many caracal are left or where they are found or what is happening with their population. But we just know from occasional camera trap photos or the lucky photographer or the lucky naturalist who comes across the caracal that they still exist. And these, again, this is an example of a small cat which is quite big, and they're even known to bring down antelope. In fact, a local name for a caracal in one part of India is Hinotra. Hino or Hiran in that language means deer, and Throa means the animal which kills it. So Hinotra is a caracal, which is an animal which literally means a cat which kills deer, though it is a small cat. So this is the story of the caracal. But the reason for the caracal's absence, or the absence of people's memories, to be more precise, is because of a few reasons. One is the fact that it is reaching its westernmost extreme range limit in India. So there's a very high chance that the population intrinsically was always low. And another reason could be that the caracal was used heavily in the olden days as a cat to hunt partridge by the Indian nobility. So they actually used caracals as pets along with Asiatic cheetahs. Asiatic cheetahs to hunt and fast antelope, whereas caracal were used to hunt partridge. So the cheetahs, as most of you know, India had 16 wildcats, but the cheetah has died out as of 1953. But the caracals still live on. But a lot of their population is believed to have been lost because of this practice of trapping them and taming them for the hunting purposes of the Indian nobility. So very similar to the Caracal, we are going to a very different kind of desert. So we are talking about the hot desert where the Caracal and the desert cat were found. But moving away from that, we are going to an area which is the high cold deserts of the Himalayas. And this is a cat which looks very similar to a Caracal, but this is a Eurasian Lynx. Another cat which is found all across Europe, reaching its southern, southwestern limits in India. So the Eurasian Lynx is another very clear characteristic member of a small cat that can really match up and sometimes even dominate a big cat. So this small cat can weigh up to 28 to 30 kilograms at times, whereas an adult snow leopard, which it shares its range with, can weigh 35 to 40 kilograms. So it's not much of a difference, and this one is a far more stocky cat. So the lynx, you can say very clearly that it's a short, stubby tail, very broad feet to walk in snow, tall ears to detect movement of prey amongst the snow, and also for thermoregulation, and generally a very powerful cat. So I've seen them bring down wild sheep in the Himalayas and even a hare once, and they're very beautiful. And like we spoke about the desert cat, Even here in the desert, for some strange reason, the lynx seem to be found in multiple color morphs. So if you go to different valleys in the Himalayas, we come across lynxes with different color patterns. So some of them are reddish, some of them are grayish, some of them are very pale. Some believe it's a summer and winter coat shift, but I've seen them across seasons showing differences in colors. Maybe over time, the Indian subspecies may become very distinct and may even be classified as a species. We don't know. But for now, we have a lot more to understand about the lynx in the high cold deserts of India because we know they exist, we know where they're found, and we know a little bit about what they eat and what they do, but more than that, what the role they play, where they fit in the ecosystem, and what exactly is their importance is something we are yet to figure out. Because usually, when you talk about deserts, there's a lot of importance that is given to the balance of things because it's already such a harsh environment. So, if you lose something or reduce the population of one member, it could have huge ramifications in other aspects of desert life. So these are things we need to understand very quickly in order to solve these mysteries. So this is a typical habitat of a lynx. I just want to, we were talking about high Himalayan deserts, and I just thought this would be a good way to give you a perspective of what a Himalayan desert is. A treeless, dry landscape is a Himalayan desert, and this village is at 14,000 feet. And this is a cold desert as compared to a hot desert that you come across in uh, uh, in Rajasthan or even in the parts of Central America. So this, unfortunately, is the story of the lynx. You can see that the lynx live around these villages, and very often they do come into villages and hunt sheep because they are capable of it. And recently they have been trapped and relocated, but unknown to the rest of the world, there could be a lot of lynxes which are being poisoned or killed in retaliation by the people because they've lost their flock of sheep to a particular lynx over time. So another interesting story I heard, which we all know about cats, their cats are not known for long distance running. So one of the locals actually told me the easiest way to kill a lynx is to chase it for a short distance. It'll jump, it'll go really fast, and then it'll tire out and sit down. And all they do is they pelt it to death with stones. So that's how easy it is to catch a lynx. That's the local told me, and I would have never believed it if not for that story. I mean, you think it's a cat, you'll never be able to catch it in the mountains. Locals say it's one of the easiest things to do, simply because they can't sustain their own pace after a few maybe 10 to 20, 30 meters, and after that they stop and they just sit low, hoping that you don't see them, but you can approach them and do this. But luckily, these two lynxes that have been captured recently have been relocated back into the habitat. Another cat of the high cold deserts of the Himalayas is the Pallas's cat, one of the strangest members of the cat family. It is named the Latin name Ontocolobus, literally means ugly ears. And I don't think there's anything ugly about their ears, but unfortunately, somebody who named this cat believed that it had ugly ears. Ontocolobus manul. So manul is the name of the Pallas's cat in Mongolia, where it is actually far more popular and easily seen. But there are parts of India where one can see the Pallas's cat, usually in high altitude marshes. So there are these small marshes in the desert where a lot of birds nest, a lot of voles, big burrows, and there are these rocky outcrops that overlook these marshes, and that is usually the sure shot place to look for a Pallas's cat. And this is how beautifully they camouflage in the rocky outcrops at the edge of the marshes, and whenever they see an opportunity, they go into the marsh, make their hunt, and go back into these rocky outcrops. And usually they choose a rocky outcrop which has a multitude of interlinked tunnels. So that helps them move undetected and enter from one part of the rock and exit from another part. They're very, very clever in how specific they are to the kind of home and habitat that they require. So this is a very rare picture of a Pallas's cat in the marsh. This is a family of three kittens. The mother had gone for a hunt, and the person who took this photo came across it at I think around 15,000 feet in a plateau called Ladakh in the northern extreme of India. So moving to a very different habitat, we have two more of the small cats left. This is the marbled cat. As you can see, why it gets the name marbled. It has a very beautiful, marbled, smooth yet distinct fur coat. This is a cat which is found all across Southeast Asia and northeastern India. And the very distinctive feature about this cat is that it is known to have the largest and the heaviest tail as compared to body size of any of the cats in the planet. That's a marble cat. And as usual, I like you spoke about the leopard cat. The marble cat is arboreal. The fat tail helps it move around the canopy, descend to the dense undergrowth, hunt for a bit, and escape back into tree cover. But unfortunately, I'm not able to tell you more about the marble cat because the population in India, we don't really know much about. We see them once in a while when we are on a hike. We see them for a few seconds, they disappear. We get them on camera traps. But what exactly they do, how many are there, what is their range, how important are they in their habitat, what do they hunt on a regular basis? These are all questions that we don't yet have an answer to because they usually live in dense rainforest, and most of their range, northeastern of states of India, are a heavy hunting belt. So there is a lot of marble cat data we have is usually from hunters' houses where their skins have been hanging in their trophy storehouses, and that's pretty much what we know about the marble cat. Another cat which falls into the same category is the golden cat. This is again a Himalayan cat which is found higher up in the Himalayas, usually in the forested range, not like the lynx or the Pallas's cat, but around 5,000 to 8,000 feet in the Himalayas. And the interesting thing about the golden cat is that you don't really see the golden color except on the forehead and occasionally on certain light conditions. But it's again one of the small cats which can look much bigger than expected. It's a ground dwelling cat which moves amongst the undergrowth, usually hunting rodents and birds. But the most interesting thing about the golden cat is that it comes in so many different colors. Can you believe this one is a golden cat too? This is a golden cat. This is a golden, and all of these golden cats have been camera trapped in one patch of forest. So it is not a strange thing to see so many different types or color morphs of golden cats. And if you look at it closely, the only distinct feature is the broad white whisker that they have in each of the morphs. And a very interesting fact about the golden cat is that it is found in the northeast of India and southern China and Bhutan, and it is also found in the Central African forests. How the same species has two very distinct populations on the planet, we still don't know. It's probably a one-off case, but it is also there in Central Africa, the rainforests, and in the Himalayan forests of India, Bhutan, and Burma and southern China. Those were the 10 small cats. We know how important they are as regulators of the ecosystem in how they hunt, their own population dynamics. We know that the lynx or the Pallas's cat, both of them hunt voles, which otherwise dig up the soil too much and discourage growth of vegetation. The little bit of digging that they do encourage, loosens up the soil and encourages vegetation to grow. But if their population is not controlled by the Pallas's cat and the lynx, then their explosion of the rodent population would affect the marsh habitats in the desert. This is just one small example of how small cats play a key role in the regulation of habitat. And I am going to be very clear in what I'm saying now that all the benefits of small cats are attributed only to wild species, not the feral cats. Feral cats cause more damage than good. They're usually in urban environments hunting wild prey where they usually don't belong. There, there's a lot to do with feral cats, which I'll talk about. Um, this is one important problem with feral cats. When feral cats get into the wild, this is a jungle cat which is probably crossed with the feral cat. So this is what is happening to a lot of our small cats is that they are crossbreeding with feral cats and the wild gene pool is being lost. Especially remember what I spoke to you about the rusty spotted cat. The rusty spotted cat is actually a small cat, but I've seen sometimes rusty spotted cats which are as big as a domestic cat, which obviously means that they have crossbred with a domestic population of cats. Like feral cats, feral dogs can also be a huge problem in, and that is actually one of the biggest problems for wildlife in India, the explosion of a feral dog population, because there's so much food wastage. There is a lot of explosion of human settlements in different places. So now feral dogs are found deep into our wild spaces, and they are hunting wildlife, not just small cats, but uh, a whole spectrum of wildlife. But small cats again are an important uh, group of species that have been affected by the explosion of the feral dog population. So we have to remember that small cats, as small as they may be, like in the desert ecosystem, they are the apex predator. There is no big cat over there. They are the ones which control. So that is how important small cats can be to certain environments. And if you actually look at them as even not the apex predator, we have seen through many examples in this presentation that they are playing as significant a role as the charismatic big mammals of the region. But uh, it is a country with 1.3 billion people. There is a lot of development happening. There is a lot of different kinds of people in different parts of the country with different mindsets. And the development affects the large mammals later than the small mammals first. I mean, we all often drive along highways and we don't stop much if we see a dead snake or a dead rodent because it doesn't affect us that much. But when we come across, in the recent years, we are starting to come across roadkills of small cats because most of the highways fragment their habitat. The elephants and tigers are able to avoid it, but the small cats, unfortunately, because of their adaptability, stick onto the same area and get killed. And this is a picture on the right shows a fishing cat which is being killed in the fish farms of West Bengal, which is what I spoke to you about some time ago, where they have been adapted to live amongst the shrimp and the fish farms. And when they are caught, uh, it is a largely uneducated section of society which reacts this way. Uh, I don't want to brand people as this or that, but unfortunately, there is a lot of realities which we need to face with conservation in a country with 1.3 billion people with their own set of ideas. So forget all this, forget all the complications of conservation, forget all the issues of small cats. The fundamental problem of small cats is that we don't know enough about them or how important they are for or the role they play in a habitat like this forest that you see in the picture in front of you. Until we sort that out, we may not be able to solve many of the riddles of the forest. And we need to do it quickly because only when they're gone will we realize what we have missed or the effects that their loss is having on the ecosystem. So we don't want to go that far. We want to make sure small cats get the same amount of importance as every other charismatic animal on the planet. So the small cats affect both this dense forest and this cold desert habitat in the same way. But in both situations, we don't know how they do it and how important they are, and we don't know what will happen when we lose them. And it's a very dangerous situation to be in. And like I'd like to finish with this by saying the loss of small cats is a big problem which we don't truly understand yet. Thank you so much for listening in today. I'll pass it on to Kendall again for if any of you have any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Surya. We do have some good questions for you. I just want to remind everyone
Sure.
who's watching, if you have a question today, you can submit that in your control panel under the questions field. All right, so we'll start out with a question about the feral dog and cat populations. Are there any efforts being made to control them?
So the feral dog and cat population in India, as a government policy in our country, the government has left it to the states. So different states handle it differently. So the state of Rajasthan, the city of Jaipur is handling it very well, where they're capturing the dogs and spaying them and making sure they're controlling the feral dog population. But in wild places, there is a whole issue of feral dogs, and there is no policy officially from the government because the government doesn't want to take up the sentiment of tackling or handling this new nuisance of feral dogs because I like most of the people that I'm going to be talking to now. I love dogs, but everything I feel has its place. But it's a very complicated conservation issue when you take human emotions into consideration. Like for example, feral dogs are spreading rabies to the wild dogs in India. They even spread distemper to wild gore and tigers, and they've even been caught hunting crane chicks. The very highly endangered black-necked crane lays its eggs in Ladakh in some marshes, and the feral dogs hunt the chick because the chicks can't fly for the first 3 months. So the cranes have, out of the 26 nests in the last 3 years, I think only 3 or 4 have survived. So if this continues for another 3 or 4 or 5 years, the population which breeds in India will stop visiting. So that is how drastic the feral dog population is. And I'm giving you very, very few examples. And if you to answer your question more directly, I would say the government is not doing enough, but certain individual local cooperation bodies are taking the right steps. But they're not. That's not being used as a big enough example for others to follow suit.
All right. Are there any studies going on right now, major studies about wild small cats in India, and is the government sponsoring any research?
Well, there is some work being done by WWF and the Wildlife Institute of India, WII. There are people studying in small cats, but a lot of them who study small cats have spent a lot of time studying this particular animal, the jungle cat. There have been people who study the links, but these are, you have to remember, it's not about funding, it's not about the will to do it. It's also very, very difficult. You need someone with a, there needs to be a lot of technology employed. There needs to be a big radio collaring program. There needs to be a big monitoring program. It has to be a long-term project. But unfortunately, a lot of the lives of the small cats, the habitats they occupy, is very ephemeral, and they're also, you can lose them very easily in the landscape that they live in. So it has a lot of challenges. There is some preliminary work happening. uh, there are some ecologists who are trying to put the puzzles together. Like a friend of mine, Vivek Ramachandran, worked extensively on high altitude rodents, but without his own knowledge he started working on the Eurasian lynx, which is the main predator for these rodents. And he solved a lot of riddles with the Eurasian lynx. But having said that, there is still a lot of work to be done. We are talking about over 100 years of observing the Bengal tiger, from British officers to hunters to researchers to government to scientists, to get to our understanding of the tiger today. And we haven't even done 10 years of solid work on small cats. So what are we even talking about? We are a long way away from the truth.
Hmm. We've got a couple questions here about the Eurasian lynx. The first one is, how is it different from the snow leopard?
Well, the Eurasian lynx, let me go back to the slide, if that's okay. The
Mhm.
Eurasian lynx is, firstly, it's, remember big cat, small cat difference? The Eurasian lynx is a small cat, and the snow leopard is a big cat. Okay, here we go. So, snow leopard and where's the lynx? Yeah, Eurasian lynx. You can see snow leopard, long tail, almost no tail, short tail, tall ears, short ears, very stout body, very slender, short leg. The lynx generally has a longer hind limbs as compared to the forelimbs to help it jump and catch prey, whereas the snow leopard has a long tail to help it run downhill. So the snow leopard is a very, very different cat. It has rosette, it looks like a leopard, but with a more square face, a long tail, and a short stature. But a lynx is very similar to a Canadian lynx or the bobcat in many ways. So the difference you can say is very similar to a bobcat and a mountain lion, as it is to a Eurasian lynx and a snow leopard.
Mhm. Are there any programs to reimburse shepherds for their dead sheep to deter them from killing Eurasian lynx?
Right, that's a very, very interesting question. Yes, there is a scheme in place. But the truth about these schemes is that the shepherd needs to prove that his animal has indeed been taken by lynx. So if you look at a big cat, they usually take the carcass to a place and they eat it over a few days. But if you look at a lynx or a wolf, they usually take it to some nondescript area which the farmer can't find, firstly, and he is unfortunately not able to find a carcass or prove to the government officials that the lynx or the wolf has been responsible for the loss of his livestock. So he doesn't get the compensation. And the second thing is, most of these animals live in very remote high Himalayan habitats, and the people also live there. So for them to get to a government official and file a complaint, and the official to come to their village and assess the situation and then take it back to the government office, do the paperwork and process the money, the whole thing takes 3 to 4 visits by the villager and a month or two at least for the money to be processed. So in this time, the villager probably has spent more money than the compensation he's going to get. So after a point, it is a flaw in the system. There has to be better ways. There are NGOs and some private organizations which are helping speed up the compensation process. It's working in some areas, but to tackle a country as large as India, we need a much more solid government policy.
Wow, yeah. Okay, next question is about the rusty spotted cat, and someone's just wondering, because they are adapted to climb trees, are their claws specially adapted to help them?
Uh, I actually don't have a proper answer to that one. I know they have the long, fat, cylindrical tails to be arboreal. They're generally lightweight cats. So you have to remember one thing. Generally, cats which are lighter, like for example, a lion in Africa or a tiger in India, finds it very difficult to climb trees. But a lion cub or a Bengal tiger cub in India climbs trees very easily. But as they grow bigger, they grow too bulky and fat that they're not able to climb trees anymore. So, as opposed to that, being the smallest cat, they're able to climb trees. They do have sharp claws. They do. They have a low center of gravity. So yes, they can. All cats can climb, except that some of the big cats get so big that they can't climb anymore. I don't think there's any one particular cat in the world which cannot climb trees. Even the Bengal tiger and the lions can, except that they become too heavy to climb after a point.
Mm-hmm. Another trait that someone was asking about was on the caracal. They noticed that there were some small straight hairs growing out of their ears. What's the purpose of
Yes,
that?
that's another good question. So this picture, I think I'll use this picture to delucidate that. So those hairs help the caracal. They act as sensory tactile hairs. So they help sense movement and assess, because the caracal, like I told you, has longer hind limbs and shorter forelimbs. So it hunts based on one particular jump. So it has to make sure the jump is as accurate as it needs to be. And these hairs, along with their whiskers, and they have a particular organ called the Jacobson's organ inside their mouth. The three additional receptors, apart from sight, smell, and hearing, helps them be more accurate, especially in the dark, in assessing their situation and their prey. So even some of the birds, if you notice, have hairs coming out of their beak. They work in a very similar way. They're called rictal hairs, RICTAL, rictal hairs, and those hairs help birds detect the slightest movement of insects in flight and catch them. So this is very similar to that in many ways. And also, people say the caracals have a very good sense of hearing, and those hairs help direct sound along with the hair tufts in their ears as such into the ear to make sure they are able to detect sound better and detect the movement of a rodent inside the grass or underground.
They're beautiful. So another question here is if all of these cats have a similar average number of kittens in their litters, or does it vary a lot?
Well, generally, all cats tend to have, wild cats, I would say, have between 3 and 5 kittens as a thumb rule, all cats. But with small cats, because of the difficulties they face in their terrain, usually one or two survive to adulthood, not more. You have to remember with small cats, the social dynamics is also there. There are adult male cats which will try to kill the young if it's not their own. There is other predators. They even fall prey to birds of prey. They fall prey to snakes. They fall prey sometimes to even things like a young jungle cat can be killed even by a large crow. So there is a lot of vulnerabilities with small cats. I've never seen a small cat successfully bringing up more than two youngsters to adulthood. Though I've seen very tiny kittens, three or four, with jungle cats, rusty spotted cats, and even I've seen a fishing cat with two kittens. So yeah, on an average, any cat in the world generally has three to five, and small cats in India, in most of the situations, successfully raise one or two.
Mhm. All right, and last question I'll take today. I'm going to combine a couple actually.
Okay.
There were a couple questions about wildlife trade and hunting, and are any of these cats particularly susceptible to either of those?
Yes. The most of the cats, especially the lynx, the Palace's cat, are and the marble cat are hunted for their pelt because they have very thick coats and they're hunted for their pelt, which is then taken to Tibet through Nepal. It's a very well documented illegal trade route, which a lot of the organizations, including WWF, are trying to work to stop. Most of the hunting in India for poaching has stopped in that regard, but marble cats are still hunted in the northeast for their meat because that's mostly tribal areas and there is a lot of hunting there. Um, Apart from that, there is also an interesting hunting festival that happens in West Bengal. So remember this story of the fishing cat that we spoke about some time ago. Uh, the fishing ponds around the same areas, especially a little south of there is a hunting festival where certain hunting communities in that region go out and go on a week-long hunting massacre, and they hunt a lot. But again, I wouldn't classify that as poaching or illegal wildlife trade. I just think it's something that's been happening there for hundreds of years. Obviously, it has to stop, but it can't be put under the same bracket as poaching or illegal wildlife trade. Um, uh, Let me just go back here. As far as I know, small cats do not face any serious uh, threats of illegal wildlife trade or poaching. But like I told you, the Palace's cat and the lynx and the marble cat, because of the richness of their coat and how fat their fur can be, and also some of the lynx and Palace's cat fur is used as headgear in certain Tibetan uh, basically rituals. They wear them as headgear, and they make caps like their traditional mask caps out of them. So that has been happening. It's probably still happening, but not in the scale that it used to happen. But you have to remember these cats are found outside India also. And one of the biggest problems of conservation has always been cross-border conservation, influencing the policies of your neighbors to protect your wildlife. For example, we talk about protecting let's say gorillas in Uganda and Rwanda. Uganda and Rwanda are doing a great job in protecting them, and but the gorillas have their right to cross over into DRC or Congo or Zaire, and there they're not there it's again no man's land for the gorillas. So how does Uganda and Rwanda influence the other countries around them to protect the gorillas? So that's a similar situation that India faces with countries like Nepal, Pakistan, China, Afghanistan, where Burma also to the east, where all of these problems arise. I'm not saying India is perfect and the other countries are the problem. I'm just saying each of them have their own issues and they all have to work together in solving the issue together.
Mhm. Definitely can be a complicated issue, that's for sure.
Yep.
Well, Surya, thank you so much. This was a fascinating presentation and a great way to end our week. I really appreciate you staying up late as always to present for us. I'm going to hand it back over to you for any closing comments you want to make.
Uh, I'd firstly like to thank everyone for joining in. It's been lovely to talk about cats and Indian wildlife again. I mean, especially in this time, in these dark ages in the modern Indian era, and to talk about wildlife feels like I'm with them once more. And I hope all these things pass soon, and we can go back to conserving wildlife after we figure out a way to protect ourselves in these new 2020-2021 problems. And thank you so much. And I absolutely enjoyed sharing my stories with all of you today.
Well, thanks again, Surya. And we all wish you well and hope you stay safe. Thank you so much for taking the time again.
Thank you, Kendall. Thank you, everyone.
I would also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. Be sure to join us on Monday for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out next week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. And of course, keep an eye out for our Sunday e-news announcement. We did record today's presentation and we'll have the replay available on our website soon. And with that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. Have a great weekend.